My name is Laura Miller. I am the newly inaugurated Assistant Treasurer, which means I get to deal with money. So if you aren't a member, please join. And I would like our protocol today is that we're actually going to have two speakers, one from Belize and one from South Africa. Dylan Vernon from Belize is going to go first. He has a very distinguished background, although I just heard him say he has a new gig at the University of Belize, so he's obviously coming up in the world. He's going from politics to academia. And Dylan is going to speak about, well, I'll let you introduce yourself because it's a very lengthy title. Go ahead, Dylan. Dylan will speak for about 20 minutes to half an hour. And then if anyone has questions or comments, you're more than welcome to make them. Please use your raised hand if you can. If you're not able to, then just let me know or put it in chat, and I will definitely call on you. Thank you very much. Dylan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning from Belize. Good afternoon, your time, I know. No, I would simply say that, yeah, I am now the director of a new policy institute at the University of Belize, the Belize Policy Research Institute, BELPRI, something that I've had ever since I was in my 30s to be a part of, and finally I'm able to help to create it. And as you know, countries like Belize, we're still in the process of nation building, and things like this are very important to establish. So yes, I'm back in academia in a sense, not teaching, but doing policy related research that immediately, hopefully, have a advocacy role for changing policies in Belize. But I'm here today in my capacity as a member of a new advocacy action group called Liberation 921. And the 921 refers to September 21st, the date of Belize's independence in 1981. And we're a new group, just started last September, but came about as quite a few groups have over um, the Israeli genocide in Gaza, and some protests and actions around that issue. And then we formed formally, and we're now doing much like Caribbean Labor Solidarity, webinars and actions in Belize and with others in the region on issues of national and regional interests to promote justice and human dignity. And my topic today, choosing poison or principles, Belize, Cuba, and Donroe, kind of speaks for itself. Um, as I sit here right now, we in Belize are feeling in a tangible way the ill winds, the ill imperial winds blowing from the north. And as you know, Belize is situated in the mainland right next to Mexico, and we're some 800 miles from the empire, the entity. And we feel in a very tangible way the new, in fact, not new, but I suppose the new the next chapter in this expanding U.S. presence in the region, the Donroe Doctrine. Um, and I also bring from my colleagues, I think some of them will be on today, solidarity from Liberation 921. I know that you have your own struggles in the UK, and you are doing your part to have discussions and expose injustice in the UK. I chose this title today after reading an article in one of the local newspapers, the Mandala, And I will read it out to you because I think it frames in a very good way the topic for today, which is to focus on Belize and Cuba as a microcosm of what has been happening in the region. And it's by Jasmine Anderson, and it's called To Decolonize or Re-Imperialize. Do we get to pick our own poison? Question mark. And she writes, even as decolonization continues, new poisons emerge. Under Donald Trump's second term as president, the United States appears unwilling to embrace a polycentric world order. Instead, its actions suggest a re-imperial drive and consider three toxins: the withdrawal from multilateralism, hemispheric dominance, and extrajudicial interventions. From abandoning UN agencies to reviving the Monroe Doctrine, from tariffs and blockades to the abduction of a sitting president, these moves signal not a cooperative world, but a re-imperial one. For regions like the Caribbean, the new US national security strategy swallows us whole. And she asks at the end, will Belize be able to choose its poison served by these shifting global norms? She says, we may not, but can we choose to keep our own principles? And so that was the background to this topic. And what I intend to do in the short time I have is to in a very informal way share with you um, how this is looking on the ground in Belize, particularly in the context of uh, Belize and Cuban relations. Um, I think that some of you may know that Belize's independence in 1981 was long delayed because of the territorial claim of the Republic of Guatemala against Belize. And at that time, the United States played a critical role in delaying Belize's independence because of the Guatemalan claim. Belize did not want to move to independence without the support of the United States. And when that finally came, it came on the Carter in 1980, and we moved to independence. The I cannot think of a time since then, even after independence, when there was this neoliberal spurge and when we splurged and when we had basically the US dictate for a few years Belize's economic policy. I cannot remember a time since then when the US's presence, its diplomatic, economic, political diplomacy has been such a major aspect of Belizean life and society. Um, it is for me, having lived through all this, the time that I can say I can feel this most tangible in my own lifetime as a Belizean and as part of the Caribbean. Um, and I'll explain why. So, Belize and Cuba, I mean, taking this relation with our neighbor to the east to as an example of how we're feeling this and some background. Cuba during that delayed independence experience we had played a critical role in supporting Belize regionally, getting South American nations on board and supporting Belize, and also at United Nations. And so we had this relationship with Cuba informally going all the way back. Of course, we didn't have formal relations. And after independence, we also had informal relations until 1995, when diplomatic relations were officially established. And before that time, and this is part of my own history, I directed an NGO called SPED, Society for the Promotion of Education and Research. And one of the things we did was to administer the Cuban scholarships that were coming to Belizeans at the time in an informal way. And then the state took it over in 1995. 2 years ago, the president of Cuba, Diaz-Canel, visited to celebrate the 30 years of our relations. And it has been an excellent friendship. Over 1,000 Cuban doctors and nurses and other professionals have come to Belize over that time. Uh, Almost 400 Belizeans have been to Cuba to study in various areas, including and especially medicine. And we all know of the Cuban medical brigades that came during the COVID pandemic. Um, so Cuba has been a very good friend to Belize, and Belize has also supported Cuba diplomatically, um, not only in terms of at the United Nations and annual votes, but also statements over time, either as Belize or through CARICOM, and also because we are an English-speaking nation in the Central American area. Um, Developed English as a second language training, which Cubans have taken advantage of as part of the little that we give back. Um, so with that backdrop, um, I must say that Belizeans generally see Cubans as friends. We have good relationships, and we're now at the point where the ill winds coming from the north are telling us, break up that friendship or else. Um, and how do these threats manifest themselves? Well, in 2025, last year, you might remember just after the new Trump term began, there were threats through the Secretary of State Rubio on Caribbean nation leaders losing visas because of what they described as the illegal exploitation of Cubans through the medical brigades. And CARICOM successfully, to some extent, stalled that. But that was, in a sense, perhaps the last regional solidarity approach that at least halted that for a short time. But since then, as the escalation has continued, especially against Cuba, we have had more and more poison being sent our way. Um, as one sort of backdrop, I must say that before Trump was reelected, Belize had negotiated a grant from the United States of 125 million US dollars. This was mostly for education and energy, and it was a sort of recognition of the good environmental work that Belize was doing. This was under the Biden administration. Anyway, as soon as Trump won, that was revoked, and reinstating it became a carrot and a stick. If you want this money, you have to do this, you have to do that. And it was finally reinstated 2 months ago, and it's been shrouded in secrecy as to what Belize had to say and give up to get back that money. But we can match one on one, and Belize was, in my words, forced to sign a safe third country agreement with the US to basically accept deportees from the US. And while that has not yet begun, the agreement was made. Um, and as you know, the migration policy in the US is at this point very cruel, and it is having a lot of effect already on Belizeans. We can come back to that. Belize also signed an agreement, and this has been true for other Caribbean countries too. It's not one you hear about a lot, but this is in migration assistance or coming under that general term. But basically, what it is that the US is providing biometric and security assistance to Belize to improve how it its borders scrutinize people coming in and collect data. And part of this agreement is, of course, that the U.S. is providing this equipment, and there is a lot of concerns about data integrity. But it is basically collecting information and basically handing you the systems. And this is part of the U.S. trying to get more information on having the fewer people going to the north. Now on Cuba, of course, the big issue now is expelling the medical brigade. In Belize, it is now 100 or so, but playing and having played a significant role in the development of Belize's medical um, national healthcare system. And especially in rural areas where there are very few doctors, and especially in the poorest part of urban areas, and playing a critical part in the rollout of what is Belize's first national insurance health scheme. Um, Now, I can tell you from now that Belize's reaction to this has been encouraging. The Prime Minister has called it for what it is, saying publicly that we are under pressure from the United States to do this, and we don't want to do it, but we are negotiating. That's been basically the stance of the Prime Minister and the government. Um, and Yet it is very clear from what he has said that this will happen before the end of the year. And Belize is just holding out for time. But the that encouraging part of the Prime Minister being very honest with the people and saying, look, we are being pressured to do this, we don't want to do it, has actually, it's kind of unique in the Caribbean because most leaders would basically not be so candid in saying what the reality is. Um, and Belize, and very openly again, the Prime Minister said that we are exploring medical professionals from the Philippines and other countries uh, so that the gap can be filled. And I think the holding out is basically convincing the United States that while the brigade will leave, and this is my words here, while the brigades will leave, we must have a plan in place to replace them before this happens. But having said that, the U.S. will get its way. The medical brigade will leave Belize, and this, in a sense, Belize will join the other countries in CARICOM that have done so. At my count, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, St. Lucia, Antigua and Barbuda, even Guyana. And I think there are a couple others there who have already decided to do this. And um, and this is not unique, of course, to the Caribbean. The same thing is happening in Central America. Um, so what does a country like Belize, a small country like Belize, being so close to the belly of the beast, do in this circumstance when we are being forced to take these poisons that we wouldn't normally take? And one of the things, of course, is that we can't do it alone. We have to be a part of other countries who are in the same boat, getting together and opposing this. Um, Unfortunately, CARICOM has not um, stood up to the challenge in a very encouraging way. Belize has been at the table in CARICOM, putting forth, I think, a call for more action. A couple other countries have too in CARICOM, and and until the press release that was put out by CARICOM, I think it was 2 weeks ago, that was the strongest uh, sort of condemnation about the U.S. policies in Cuba from a human rights perspective and a principle perspective. Uh, CARICOM did not say much before that, but it is encouraging that its latest statement has been stronger. I think that was 27th of May. But on a whole, CARICOM has not stepped up to the extent that, say, Belize might want and other countries might want. And if you recall, when the Palestine genocide was happening, there was the genocide in Palestine by Israel. Um, there was a lot of talk in Caribbean countries about what to do, and Belize, in a sense, was leading the charge. And we even broke off diplomatic relations with Israel, which is still the case. But no one followed, and Belize began to feel isolated in CARICOM in taking these moves without the support of the others. When we looked behind us, we were the only ones. Uh, and when it comes to Sika, the CARICOM of Central America, it's even in worse situation, been basically stagnant since the past 4 or 5 years. Um, so we're in a situation where we are trying to get regional action on this issue. I know that Belize has contributed, as has Barbados and a few other countries in CARICOM, a small number, to supporting humanitarian aid to Cuba through Mexico, which is one of the few countries that has been acting with some dignity and strength vis-a-vis the US when it comes to the Cuba issue. But when you take this all into consideration, the threat from the US of visas being withdrawn, the more challenging process of getting green cards in the US, the threat of even removing nationality and having, in this case, say, Belizeans and Caribbean people being among those who might have to choose between a US passport and a Belize passport or a Caribbean passport. Um, Remittances being threatened as the interests in Belize to return or not to stand out increases, and the removal of this 125 million US dollar grant looms over us. And what makes all this a little bit more difficult for Belize is that we still have the Guatemalan claim to all our territory unresolved, and this is now at the International Court of Justice. And so some Belizeans feel we have to tread very carefully with the US on this issue, because even when we do have a victory at the ICJ and we get the ICJ to rule in our favor, there will still have to be implementation and monitoring of the ruling. And in a world where we have weaker international organizations, that is a worry for also Belizeans. And it's part of the equation when Belize decides what to do. And so those are the poisons, the principles for us as a small nation with a territorial threat, or the usual ones: self-determination, territorial integrity, sovereignty, uh, all of which must have the respect for international law to succeed. So it's a bit of a dire situation on the ground. The reality is that we feel at Liberation 921, as I talk to my colleagues, that we will be forced to take more poison. There's no doubt about that. I haven't even mentioned the increased tariffs um, in the interest of survival. And unfortunately, I think the majority of Belizeans will will not protest against this in huge numbers in the context of the realities which I just mentioned, but also the legacy of decolonization, the fact that so many Belizeans, about perhaps the same number who live here, live in the US, and their relationships are strong. survival for some Belizeans depend on remittances from the US. But also, civil society organizations have been weak as people deal with the ongoing issues of poverty, inequality, criminality. And I'm telling you that the misinformation from the media uh, from the North is very high, and even in the context of our own media. And so, in this overall context, it is not very encouraging. Cuba does have friends in Belize still. As I said, the government's approach is encouraging, but almost inevitably going to be that of having the Cuban brigade leave. And so our principles are in serious trouble, and you can feel them in a tangible way. We're still clinging on to these, but the only way to keep them is to continue joining with others, getting like-minded countries in the region on board, and continuing as the Caribbean Labor Solidarity is our our protests, even through those times when we're not able to change the result. And I think I will end there for now in terms of sharing with you the reality on the ground in Belize, except to say that one, I went to fill up my tank of gasoline yesterday, and the price was $8 per gallon. The that has affected the cost of living inflation in Belize, and by extension the rest of the Caribbean is way out of whack with what it has been where it was before the invasion of Iran. And so the US looms large in everything. It is the cause of this new this high spike in inflation recently that is already building on already high inflation. And we can actually feel these ill imperial winds tangibly in Belize. So thanks for inviting me to share a bit about what's happening in Belize, and I'm open to have a discussion, answer any questions, and hear any comments.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dylan. I think we tend to forget how other countries are being affected, particularly ones we don't hear from a great deal. So that was really very instructive, certainly to me. You know, I lived in Mexico for a while, and there's a phrase that they use very widely in Mexico. It sounds better in Spanish, but I'll say it in English. It basically was Mexico's neighbor is the United States by the grace of God, but not thanks to God. So I think, and as an American, I mean, I'm dual national now, but as an American, I have to say that I have loathed Marco Rubio for about 40 years, and nothing he has ever said or done has made me feel any different. Um, I have a question for you, and then Joseph Antoine has raised his hand. My question is, have you, the general you, not just you personally, have there been unofficial discussions with Cuba about this going on, and what is Cuba's view about the situation and about the place that you're in, you being Belize?
Mhm. Yes, I mean, there are two parts to that. One is we have a new Cuban ambassador in Belize since late last year. And one of her first responsibilities was to negotiate with the Belizean government how to best to keep the medical brigade here. And those have been ongoing, but I think that I would be surprised if Cuba hasn't accepted by now that this will happen in a formal way while trying to prevent it from happening. Um, on informally, groups like Liberation 921, we have a pleasant relationship with the Cuban embassy here. We put out statements of support in, or I'm perhaps the other way, statements of condemnation of the possible move to have the medical brigade not be here, and urge the government not to do so. But on the Cuban ambassador, when she does speak to the press, would have the usual, I suppose, Cuban line in the rest of the region. Cuba is not falling apart. We're still there. We're under heavy pressure, but we will survive. We urge the people from the Caribbean to keep the medical brigades in these countries, and provide assistance as might be necessary, but basically wanting our solidarity in condemning the U.S. actions.
Thank you. How many Cubans are there in Belize in the brigade? Just as a
Right,
general
right now
idea.
it's about 100 Cubans in the medical brigade. I would say the medical brigade plus, because in addition to the medical brigade, the history of Cuban support has also been in sports, in education, in culture, and other areas, even more scientific areas, uh, coastal erosion and issues like this. So it is for Belize. I mean, we're a population of just over 400,000, and it is a significant, especially in the area of health, a significant part of our own healthcare provision to Belizeans.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Joseph, you have a question or a comment?
Yes, a question and a comment. Comment. Um, First of all, so thank you very much for the presentation. And may I ask before I deal on the question, what happened to the guy that the U.S. had forced the Belizean government to accept? The guy from Guantanamo, was that resolved finally? People feel comfortable about that? I know it happened a few years ago when there was controversy. Maybe you could just attend to that because many people don't know about that. But in terms of from your contribution this morning, in terms of CARICOM and Trinidad, you now have Trinidad being a member of the Security Council. Do you think that this is orchestrated also to ensure that the will of the United States is fulfilled based on the role that Trinidad is playing right now? And a question about the leadership of the Caribbean, the society, not just the political leadership. That there seems to be a lack of leadership by all of us in terms of how we respond to what would be a disaster in the future, because we are dismantling and this breaking down processes that took years to build up. That would take many years to even to reconstruct in the future. And I mean, it seems as though everybody is looking, waiting some miracle could happen, just as in the case of Haiti. And then finally, I hope I'm making sense. Can we maybe take examples of some of the efforts in the Caribbean, like in Grenada? There's an effort led by the citizens, by people studied in Cuba and so on, to raise funds, notwithstanding the fact that that could still be affected by the American policies towards the financial situation in Haiti. I mean, in Cuba. Do you think that if most citizens' involvement in terms of responding, that could help to influence the attitude or the behavior of the United States, notwithstanding that we know what Rubio and others are intent on? I hope that made sense. Sorry for having to go through that process to get myself to say what I have to say.
Should I go, Laura?
Go right ahead, please.
Okay. Yeah, the Guantanamo Bay issue is, I mean, in short, Belize accepted about 3 years ago now, under the previous government, a person who had been accused by the United States of being involved in 9/11, and several countries at that time were being asked to take people. Belize took one. It was a big controversy at the time, but it died down, and that person is in Belize, living quietly. But it's no longer an issue. But looking back at it, it was the beginning, and this was even it was under the Biden government, if I remember, the beginning of U.S. policy, which is continues no matter which party is in power, of pressuring countries in the region. On the Security Council in Trinidad and Tobago, yeah, what one would expect that whenever a Caribbean or CARICOM state is on the Security Council, as one of the elected members, that it would be the voice of the Caribbean, and things that we want will be put on the table. I think when St. Vincent was there, that was the case. St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This time, what I'm hearing is worry from other CARICOM nations that this might not be our voice, as Caribbean people on the Security Council. And we know why that is the case, because Trinidad has withdrawn even from the last statement. Because Trinidad and Guyana did not support the last strong statement of CARICOM on the U.S. issue. And so U.S. influence, first of all, on Trinidad and Tobago and how it votes, and perhaps U.S. influence in even getting it elected to be on the council, is certainly there. So there's concern, of course. Then we have the issue of leadership. Yes, I would say that there's no real Caribbean leaders stepping up, apart from perhaps Motley in Barbados, on occasions to give leadership to the region, and what it should be doing more in relation to calling out the United States. Again, realpolitik as it is, we understand some of why, but the fact that big countries like Jamaica, which just hosted that aircraft carrier last week, and Trinidad and Tobago, and even Guyana, these are the bigger players in the region. Having more favorable relations with the U.S. is very dispiriting to others who would want another way forward. And yes, people's efforts to lobby governments to do more, and also to support Cuba financially, is important. That's something that we are doing on the ground here in Belize as a small group, and others are doing it. These efforts are, however, very small and important, but not yet with any level of critical mass to get governments to move and resist the pressures.
Thank you. Stephen Howard has his hand up, followed by Godfrey Martin and Aaliyah Fisher. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing me. Brother Vernon, I must congratulate you and wish you best wishes on your latest elevation of prominence and fantastic summary of a very complex issue. Seeing that, and this is just my opinion, that Marco Rubio has basically been spouting this administration's ideologies as far as world dominance with the Trump doctrine, whatever the heck it is they call it. And he's implementing that, especially in the Caribbean, which doesn't have any financial impact on the world's economy. With this bully mentality that is being exhibited, especially with Belize, seeing that he has like a little over 2 more years to go, do you see an intensification of these policies? And my opinion is that he's setting Rubio up to be the next president of the US, since his current vice president has just been not as influential as Marco Rubio is. And final thing, now that this administration is basically supposedly in control of Venezuela to the south of the Caribbean, is this quest to take over Cuba means to say that if it does happen, God forbid, that America would not be in control of the Caribbean seas, the Caribbean region, where Russia has had some very significant contracts with the ports in the Caribbean, and how will that impact on international trade, commerce, and American forces in the Caribbean to try to combat Russia's and China's, well, China has a lot of ports, not Russia. China has a lot of ports in the Caribbean that it controls, especially in Jamaica. How do you see that impacting what this administration is doing to get control of the Caribbean Sea?
Dylan, would you prefer to respond to each question as they come, or would you prefer to hear a couple of people and then respond?
The latter, yeah, hear a couple of people.
Okay. In that case, Godfrey, you are next.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I just have a few comments to make. One, well, I live in the UK, but I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and I follow what has been going on in the region. What we are experiencing is an attempt at recolonization, and this is very worrying. But part of the problem why, for instance, CARICOM haven't been stronger is because of the constituent parts, the various countries more or less relying solely or primarily on the United States and the Washington Consensus model for economic development. Because the thing about sovereignty.
Oh, sorry. I just did something stupid. I beg your pardon. Unmute yourself, Godfrey.
Sorry about that. What I was saying, the thing about sovereignty is that you have to be able to feed yourself. And the founding fathers of the Caribbean integration movement had understood that we were small islands, limited populations, etc. And the criticality of binding together and having a common policy, external policy in dealing with the world was important. And also an approach to non-alignment. So this should mean, although the United States is important, is in our neighbor, and we are in their hemisphere, we should also have strong relations with others, with China, with the BRICS countries, etc. And that is where part of the problem, I think, in this scenario has in fact occurred. A lot of people, not so much the working class, want to have these US green cards, and we see the US model in terms of economic development as it. This is going, so this has affected us. One comment I would make in the case of Grenada, I saw where the Prime Minister of Grenada, when they were trying to mobilize and put the radar station there, he took a public stand, which was very helpful and which was, in a sense, probably one of the more progressive approaches, where he talked about he has to get the people's position, etc. So to me, the worrying thing about all of this development is that the region, the people are complacent because there is not sufficient dialogue and discussion. We are fed from morning till night US media propaganda. And our academics, our university isn't strong in terms of, there's a lot of podcasts, there's a lot of information out there to educate people, to let them know what is going on and to help in the mobilization. So I'll leave it at that point. I know Belize, I have done some work on a project, and Belize has been doing good in data and statistics and things like that. The problem, one of the issues that we have raised is the problem when you rely on the United States, let's say for all your cloud services, etc., and you do not build up indigenous or alternative means. When the United States are vexed with you, they hold back your money, or they block your data, etc. And it seems to me that some of the countries are getting more entangled. And the problem is, it is not simply only the Republicans. When the Democrats come, is a policy. So people have to understand that a lot of these things don't look at Rubio. You have to look at finance capital and the Wall Street and what is happening in the geopolitics in the world. You have an empire that is, declining, and it just wants to kind of take control. So to me, we have to look at ways of building up our sovereignty through mobilizing our people, organizing our political economic programs to ensure that we can't starve. Look at the experience. We need to learn from Cuba. We need to learn from Iran and all these other places. That's the only, and we need to have definitely greater discussion and unity within CARICOM. And it may call for more public debates in the populations, telling people, let's say, the Belize government position, why it has taken that position, the Jamaican government position, because you are right in saying that the governments don't discuss things, but that is what we need to put on the agenda. So so thank you for your contribution.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Dylan, do you want to come back to those two comments, and then we've got two more?
Yeah,
and
I
also,
think yes.
I want to point out that Paul Ward has put something in the chat about the visit of the USS Nimitz to Kingston Harbor, which I think is quite interesting, because there's been almost nothing about it he goes on to comment, there's been nothing in the press, but speculation is that the warship is a strategic show of force intended to intimidate Cuba. Not that it's going to have that particular message, I don't think.
Yes, it's the one on the warship is intimidation tactics indeed, and the fact is that the U.S. is what, 500 miles, if that, from Cuba, so they don't need a warship to do any more intimidation, but it's psychological, I suppose. On the question by Stephen, on Marco Rubio, I think that yes, Marco Rubio, as I think Laura will agree, has had his eyes on Cuba for a long time, has made it very, very clear that if he has any power, anything to do with it, Cuba would continue to exist as it is. That is very clear. And whether he becomes president or not, I think the U.S. policy as a whole without him will most likely continue to be, as long as a Republican is in the office, that of regime change in Cuba and all that it brings. I do believe that when Marco Rubio was talking to Trump about accepting to be Secretary of State, he said words to the effect that just give me Cuba and I'll be happy. On China in the region, yes. In fact, it is one of the reasons that the U.S. is flexing its imperial muscles, seeing the threat from China, at least economically in the region, and countries like Belize and those of the Caribbean are also, especially those that still have relations with Taiwan. I think there are very few, like Belize, um, or basically being looked at and said, "Don't you even think of establishing relations with China now?" And the others who have relationships with China, I do wonder what sort of pressures they're getting from the U.S. on that matter. I think the statements that Godfrey made were comments that I agree with. I don't see anything in particular there that I would want to add to that, except to totally agree that yeah, we need a more regional approach to these issues. There's a fear that I have that has weakened significantly, and is a big part of why the CARICOM group has been so weak. And yeah, I agree with your recommendations as to how that could be done.
Thank you. Emma in the chat has said, thanks, Dylan, for your presentation. Godwin raised a lot of important points and referenced the working class. What do Belizean workers think of what is happening to Cuba, and what can they do? And I will call on Aliyah Fisher, who is next in line.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I'm Aliyah Fisher. I'm a British Belizean, so I'm very interested in your research. And yeah, thank you for all your points. I completely agree with Godfrey Martin as well. There's not much that I can really add to that. But I just wanted to ask more specifically about Liberation 921, about how someone from the diaspora could get involved or like show support in this group. And if the group had like considered like what is the future steps for the group in considering like establishing more like international solidarity links, maybe outside of Comecon, or establishing more international solidarity links with more like grassroots organizations in the region of the Caribbean and beyond. And what type of support does the Liberation 921 like kind of get from the Belizean government? Like, is there dialogue there? And yeah, thank you.
Okay. No, I think those two questions are familiar, or similar. So maybe taking them both. Basically, what or do Belizeans, civil society, working class do and are doing on the issue of the workers and labor movement in Belize? Unfortunately, it's very, very weak when it comes to both numbers of people who are unionized and also actions that the union's taken. But having said that, the union is still the most powerful civil society group in Belize. When it flexes its muscles, the governments have listened. But on this issue that deals with Cuba and Palestine, as two of the more recent international issues, the labor unions have been totally silent about them. And And this has to do with partly with the labor unions in Belize needing new approaches and leadership and all that over time, but also because in a small society like Belize, I mean, I give the example of when Liberation 921 helped organize a demonstration in front of the U.S. Embassy on its actions in Palestine. And we had a very few people showing up. No one from the labor union showed up in terms of leadership. And it was partly because the visa, that US visa, is gold in Belize and the Caribbean to most people. In a small society, the scrutiny on an individual is much more than in a large society, where everyone would know someone who would know you. I mean, it's not too difficult. And so people don't want to push their necks out. Generally, that's the atmosphere, an atmosphere of fear over losing access or losing your existing US visa. It has happened where Belizeans have showed up at the airport to be told that they can't travel because of a visa issue, or being questioned much more when they're in the US or sent back. And that's increasing. So there's a fear there that is at the individual level that is very tangible when so many Belizeans are living in the States. That explains part of it, but on the issue of Liberation 921, this new advocacy action group that I'm a part of, right now there are 8 of us who are in as founding members, and a wider community of support that we're building, but we're not even an air all yet, so very young. But we do have a connection with the Caribbean BDS, and support some of the actions they do. They support our actions. We we have lobbied government on our first advocacy campaign was actually to urge the Belizean government to prevent Israelis from coming to Belize visa-free, as is still the case. And that is because a lot of people who travel are people who are in the military, and we don't know to what extent they've been involved in the genocide. And we got over 1,000 signatures on this in a petition, and the government basically said to us, look, yes, we consider this, but the majority of people in cabinet are of the view that we can't take the risk of doing that kind of thing right now as a government in the current geopolitical context. But that does not mean we stopped there. Clearly, that one wasn't successful. We're still going to try that one again, or keep the pressure up on that. But we move to other issues. Cuba now is one of the issues that we have put out a recent statement. And yes, we do plan to get more people involved. In fact, we have a lot of interest, and there is a demand for a group like this, and none exists at the time. And so if you go on our social media, there's Facebook and Instagram. If you type in Liberation 921 Belize, you will get information on how to contact us, what we're doing, and we're also on Instagram, and we have our contact information there, Alayan.
And of course, CLS will support you from here, and especially if you affiliate to us as per the Constitution. And if there's ever any problem with finances, just let me know as the treasurer and we will deal with it.
No, thanks for that. I didn't know there was an affiliation possible. We just registered our own name Liberation 921, and we haven't gone the step yet of registering as an NGO, but we will be doing that in the coming months. Yeah,
we will welcome pretty much any group whose foundation views we approve of affiliating to us, and that means that and this is actually for everybody who is in an organization that you think our help might be useful, at least in spreading the word. And that will mean you can have a vote on the executive, one person coming to executive meetings, and also we will help, we have our own speaker now, and we can make loud noises if necessary. So, next is, we have two hands up at the moment. One, Joseph Antoine has spoken already, and unless I see another hand, I will call on him second. But first we have, and please forgive me if I don't pronounce this correctly, Kavenioa Tlua, who has some comments to make. Please, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, you pronounced it correctly.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. This is really interesting discussion that we're having. I think for me, I've got so many questions. So I think one of them is, Dylan, this Liberation 921, do you think that you would replicate that for the other Caribbean countries? Because I'm looking at what CARICOM is doing in the space of, well, I was going to say supporting Cuba, but I think they could do a lot more. And I just think that in regards to kind of standing up to America, I think there's a lot more that should be done, can be done. This kind of approach where, for example, my family are from Guyana and St. Vincent, and I'm very disappointed with Guyana's approach and lack of support to Cuba, given the fact that Cuba has done so much in relation to providing doctors and training medical professionals throughout the whole of the Caribbean, and Guyana has been one of the beneficiaries of that. But so I think yeah, so my first point would be is, with Liberation 921, is it something that you feel could be replicated in other Caribbean countries? Over to you. Thank you.
The short answer is yes, with some caveats. I think that various countries in the region are ahead of Belize by far when it comes to organizing progressive people to act in protests of things happening and in solidarity with some actions. Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, and I'm pretty sure Grenada have similar groups, similar objectives, and so we have to learn from them too. And Liberation 921 is in touch with some of these groups through the BDS Caribbean, which has events that we attend, and also some planning meetings. So there's a regional network that is informal and not yet comprehensive, but it is. I think there's a beginning there of people across the region talking to each other more on progressive issues, and that is encouraging because we can also have eventually not only actions nationally within the countries of the Caribbean if we organize ourselves better, but also on CARICOM itself as if we have a regional approach to our advocacy.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Martin, we are going to need to move to our next speaker fairly soon. So I would really appreciate it if we could, Martin, if you could make your point, and then Joseph, make it very short. Okay, Martin, go ahead.
Yes, good day, everyone. Yeah, I just thank you so much, Dr. Vernon. I'm concerned about the level of anti-Haitianism globally. I understand that some Haitians were just having some issues settling in, even settling in Africa and Nigeria in particular. I just wanted to get a sense from Mr. Vernon, the meter of anti-Haitianism in Belize. I know a lot of Haitians have been making their way through Central America, particularly through Mexico and so on. As a CARICOM country, I want to get a sense from Dr. Vernon how Haitians treated in Belize. Thank you.
Yes.
Now, that's short. Thank you. Joseph, why don't you make your point quickly, and then Dylan
Yes,
can...
yes, and I will do. In terms of the outcome, it seems as though Iran, the situation in Iran, the war in Iran have had some influence on the world. How do you think that will have some influence once the dust is settled in terms of us developing some level of confidence, or even having a limitation on the American level of aggression? And then one of the speakers, questioners, talk about solidarity or groups connected in the Caribbean. I could say to you, like, based on our association with Friends of the Earth, Latin America and the Caribbean, there is work ahead in trying to synchronize and coordinate, to link up with efforts, particularly in relation and support of Cuba. In fact, on the 10th, I'll be at a broader meeting with the Latin Americans, and we stress from Mexico to Argentina. We are the only English-speaking country in the Caribbean that are member of Friends of the Earth Latin America and the Caribbean, except Haiti and Curacao. Thank you.
Okay, no, that's good to know. In terms of the last information you shared, something that Liberation 921 might be interested in. On the question on Haiti, and I'll use his questions to round off my own presentation. In Belize, it's a bit different, I think, from countries that might be much closer. We have had Haitians coming to Belize to go north. This has mostly been by plane through Panama, flights coming up from the south to the north, and people passing through, and there hasn't been a whole lot in numbers compared to other countries, and it hasn't been especially more recently high numbers. Belize has a very open, usually, immigration policy, especially to its neighbors, and Belizeans are generally welcoming, and I suppose part of it is because we have a very small population density. But there is a small amount of that in Belize, anti-Haitian sentiment among some parts of the population. When there's a story in the media about a dozen Cubans on a flight that were detained, this has happened a couple of times because of not having information on why they're overnighting in Belize, for example. But that is true too for Jamaican others. So it's
like
it's not singling out.
Eastern Asia, where Russia is.
And then on the last question on Iran, I think that yes, the fact that Iran has not buckled is perhaps an example of yeah, someone said a while back about the declining empire and how empires, and clearly the decline is not going to be tomorrow or the end, but there's a sense that you get from it that yeah, the US can't get its way everywhere. Clearly, it's going to focus on its own hemisphere, and this is our concern that in the Western Hemisphere, in the Americas, and I use the word broadly, um, when it is unable to have its this level of influence elsewhere, it will increase its influence here in the Americas and the Caribbean, and that is perhaps another indicator of a declining empire as it rejects the polycentric multilateral world that is developing. So we are going to go through a rough period of economic, political, and military even pressure from the United States and psychological pressure to fall in line or else. And it will be one that we have to reorganize for, re-strategize for, as people in civil society, but also as governments. And I can tell you that for a while, I think our governments will be mostly going along in the interest, as they would say, of protecting their people, um, without seeing that, yeah, once you begin to give up your principles, what happened to Maduro can happen to you, and what is happening to Cuba can happen to you. We have to be able to get that message out to more people, and that is only through hard work, education, and fighting in a very small way the huge misinformation, the huge pressure and threats and fear that is coming from the north to countries like Belize. And with that, I think I'll end it, Laura.
Thank you very much, Dylan. That was really very useful. And if anybody wants to hear it again, it is being recorded. And can I say, I'm sure on behalf of everybody in CLS that we look forward to many years of working fruitfully with you in Belize, particularly since you're a long-standing friend of Steve's.
And several people I see online. So thank you for the invitation, and look forward to Liberation 921 and Caribbean Labor Solidarity having some more formal interactions. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And of course, you're welcome. You're welcome to stay. I know you're a very busy person, but if you'd like to stay, you're more than welcome.
Thanks. I will.
Wonderful. I am now going to introduce our next speaker. Her name is Sharon Ekambaram, and I hope I pronounced that appropriately. She is from an organization called Copenhagen Africa Against Xenophobia. CAX, I believe, is that the way it's pronounced? Is the acronym. And I believe she's going to speak about the attacks against immigrant workers from other countries in South Africa. Copenhagen, she says, is an organization which was set up to defend human rights. It is a people-powered movement, which everyone in CLS will appreciate. They believe in African unity, working class solidarity, and inclusive justice. And if I've left anything out, please forgive me and do correct me. Sharon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laura, and thanks for that introduction. And you pronounced my name perfectly. I just want to also acknowledge my comrade Mike Ndlovu, who's also joined this conversation. I want to ask if it's okay to turn off my video because I'm struggling with bandwidth at the moment, if that's okay.
Yeah, perfectly right.
Thanks. I'm struggling to know where to locate this conversation with all of you. I think I'll start with noting that this month is celebrated as Youth Month in South Africa. And it's to mark the 1976 uprising, when young people, mostly scholars, hardly 13 or 14, protested against the apartheid regime, about the language of Afrikaans being taught for all subjects at all schools in South Africa. But it was really about the state regime, the repression, and the discrimination under the apartheid regime. And I think that, it is worth noting that 32 years into our democracy in South Africa, the situation is quite dire. And I want to speak to the context, because I think that's really important in understanding the xenophobia, the hating that's taking place. But before I do that, I just would like to read some quotes, because I think it helps to locate this in a global context. And a lot of what Dylan spoke about, in particular, the role, the disinformation, the role that big tech companies like Meta and Amazon are playing in fueling this hatred is of serious concern, and it's affecting the situation in South Africa as well. It is constructed. There is more and more evidence of paid bots that are spewing out hatred against, in particular, Black African brothers and sisters from the African continent. And Professor Achille Mbembe, who is a professor at the University of Witwatersrand Institute for Social and Economic Research, something called WISER, he reflected on how Africa's support and international solidarity was key in our struggle against apartheid and, of course, the colonial struggles on the African continent. And he says that our common right to inhabit this earth, to share it, to take care of it, and to repair it to a condition of its durability, as well as ours, the human race, and other living beings. And he describes the situation in South Africa as follows. He says, and I would say that this applies equally to Europe and to America. Speech is crippled. The will to hurt and to take revenge reigns supreme. And I, in that context, what we're experiencing in South Africa, and this has been taking place, I'd say the media really covered it in 2008, when 66 people lost their lives, many of them South Africans, but all of them of African descent. And then in 2021, we saw horrific scenes of violence in a province called KwaZulu-Natal. And there, over 300 people lost their lives. And again, it's people of African descent, mostly South Africans. And what we are witnessing then is the criminalization of movement of people, the criminalization of poverty in our country. Now, what's critical this year is the much contested local government elections are taking place in November. And I think, similar to the situation in America, our democracy is in serious crisis. In the last elections that took place, national elections that took place in 2024, over 12 million people who registered to vote, mostly young people between the ages of 18 and 30, didn't vote. And this has resulted in a serious crisis. The African National Congress lost its majority position, and it had less than 40% of the vote, and many other smaller parties had been getting votes, and most of them converge on the scapegoating of migrants. And we are seeing the same this year. But what has happened is, since I would say 2021, we've seen the emergence of vigilante groups like Operation Dudula and March on March. And overall, this is the concern of where is the funding coming from? They're well funded, they're well equipped, they arrive overnight, and they are well established, and they are, and the narrative is one of weaponizing nationalism, and that's of serious concern. And because of the compromised position of the African National Congress, which was the official majority party in government, it's compromised their position on migration as well. But they've also made a significant contribution towards the crisis that exists in our country with respect to management of movement of people. I just want to speak to some of the facts, because I think the disinformation is so overwhelmingly that our country is, the words, flooded by people who are illegal, irrespective of what efforts we make on the ground as Kopanang. And sorry, Kopanang, is a, it's the meaning of Kopanang. It's a Sesotho word or a Setswana word, which means come together, which means unite. And we formed in 2022, I think it is, about 3 years ago, in response to the presence of Operation Dudula. And some of our work is around trying to debunk these myths, to speak about the facts, to champion Pan-Africanism in Southern Africa, and looking at Sub-Saharan Africa and the fact that we're all part of this African continent. If you look at, I was shocked by these statistics myself. It's estimated that $43 billion in 2025 was the total of South African exports. This in the term of processed food, machinery, agricultural inputs to Zimbabwe. And many of you will know that Zimbabwe has been facing a economic and political collapse, going back decades, right back to 2000s. And I think we saw it, real meltdown in 2008. And part of this has been then structural adjustment policies, which has resulted in millions being unemployed. So 90% of the population in Zimbabwe are unemployed and are then part of the informal economy and would be described as migrant laborers, but many of them are circular migrants. So they come to South Africa to buy goods, to be able to go back and have some kind of livelihoods. And I think the same we can provide statistics of what an incredible contribution this has been to provinces that border Zimbabwe and Mozambique that are in South Africa. Now, I think what is of concern to us is, the fact, and I think where there's need for international solidarity and some way of uniting our struggles, that this is taking place in the context of Trump and the rise of fascism, and it has emboldened Islamophobia, it's emboldened xenophobia, and you're finding the language. People are much bolder to be, disseminating this hate speech that largely is fueled on social media platforms. And I think that's, some of our big concerns is how do we counter this in the context of South Africa, which remains one of the most unequal societies in the world. So, like the Make America Great Again slogan, which does speak to very real issues that ordinary people living in America could relate to, similarly, what the xenophobes are saying, and political parties like Action SA, Gayton McKenzie's Patriotic Alliance, and a number of smaller parties, it lands on fertile ground because there is a serious issue of systemic unemployment. There's a serious issue of poverty and inequality in South Africa. We remain one of the most unequal societies in the world. And this, of course, is located in our past, in our apartheid past, in the colonial past, where there was unfair privilege, afforded according to the color of one's skin. And what that system, the capitalist apartheid system, resulted in the worst form of extraction labor from Black African migrants coming from our neighboring countries, close to slavery. And they lived in shocking conditions in hostels, and this is the contribution that made the mining companies as rich as they are today, and a lot of capital companies that enjoyed the benefits of the super exploitation of Black labor in South Africa. And so our struggle is, how do we unite struggles of migrant laborers with the working class struggles in South Africa, with the domination of the disinformation and the role that mainstream media plays in giving airtime to these xenophobic forces, the vigilante groups, and there is often aggression against people, supporters of CACs, people who are part of the struggle for social justice in South Africa. And it's part of this populism, and of course it's good for ratings, it's good for profits for the media houses, and I think how do we organize ourselves to speak about the fact that our government has failed to transform South Africa? So the Constitution of South Africa is one of the most progressive in the world. It was formulated in a very inclusive way, engaging with civil society. We have an equality clause that covers, all grounds, including sexual orientation, race, class, nationality, and yet we are seeing the kind of infringements taking place. We see that the Constitution, which actually is the blueprint for transformation, it gives the state the power to be able to allocate resources to enable it to transform South Africa. South Africa, I think, is now the second largest economy on the African continent, next to Nigeria. And the role of the state is, its first priority is to ensure there's redistribution of wealth, because of the unfair privilege that a tiny minority of the population enjoyed and benefited under the apartheid regime. And now on top of this is the issue of corruption and mismanagement of funds at all levels of government. So it's a very complex situation, which is what I'm trying to get across, that we are seeing the political parties that are emerging being very much in, there's research showing that there are links with the right-wing fascists that are arising in Europe and with America. And of course, I think you all know the stance that Donald Trump has taken, talking about the genocide in South Africa and that white farmers are being killed, and whereupon we have a country where there is a serious crisis with respect to inequality. It's shocking how much of wealth is concentrated I think, just over 3,000 people in the country, and the rest are living, in poverty. So some of the things that we wanting to unite with other organizations in South Africa, and I think, sorry, just as an aside, civil society is quite fragmented in South Africa as well, given our heroic struggle against the apartheid regime, given our heroic struggle against the pharmaceutical companies more recently in our struggle for HIV/AIDS treatment, against even our own government. We are still fragmented, and I think a factor of that, and it may be worth discussing this, it seems like it's a global phenomenon as well, is the weakening of the trade union movement. South Africa, during the days of apartheid, we had one of the strongest trade union movements in the world. And it was this trade union movement that led struggles in communities around the conditions that people are living under, but also on questions of working conditions and on the struggle against apartheid itself. And so I think that, our struggle is to, where do we locate? Do we only look at disinformation? What leverage of power do we have in holding the state to account and in mobilizing so that South Africans are not don't believe this disinformation about the fact that we have millions of undocumented foreign nationals in our country. Stats SA, one of the most effective government departments, through its every 4 years doing a census and through regular surveys and of course birth registrations, has constantly put out stats on the number of international migrants. And this is not disaggregated, so it's inclusive of people, whether you're documented or not. And they say it's between 3 to 4 million, and all the signs are that those numbers are reducing and that people are not coming to South Africa or they're leaving. We have a very progressive policy on refugees, and our figures for refugees, recognized refugees, in 2010, it was sitting at 90,000, and today it's sitting at 87,000. So the numbers are reducing. We are not recognizing the people that are coming in are blocked from accessing the refugee reception offices, and they all are at risk of being arrested and deported. And this is happening on a regular basis. It's nothing short of racial profiling, because it's only targeting people coming from the African continent. And of course, that's a lucrative business for immigration officers and police, who will then solicit bribes from vulnerable people. And so I think that that's the context. What we are trying to do is work with civil society to get literacy, people to understand what the real problems are, even though I'm sure you would have read in the news about the Madlanga Commission, the police being captured by cartels, the corruption in the public health system, the corruption in the education system, corruption at all levels of government. The most recent is one of the public hospitals called Tembisa, where one of the clerks, finance person, blew the whistle on corruption that she picked up, Babita Dukaran, and she was assassinated. She was killed. And the information coming out now is that up to, I think, 2 or 3 billion rands has been looted, stolen, that should have been going towards improving the quality of healthcare of South Africans. But it is such a difficult task to build on the ground solidarity to hold the state to account. So, we would champion something like a universal income grant, because at the moment, you're looking at something like 36% of adults in South Africa are unemployed. And for young people, that figure is about 60%. So something ridiculous like 12 to 13 million young people are unemployed in South Africa. And these are people who are graduates, who have completed law degrees, who have finished, who are nurses, and they just cannot find work. So it would, we could mobilize to campaign for a universal income grant, because the grants at the moment are means tested, and it strips you of your dignity. You got to prove that you're poor for a 300 Rand grant, which you can't buy. With the petrol price going up here as well, with the cost of living, it gets you nothing. Or you get a pensioner's grant, or you get if you're a single parent. And these are all very small amounts, but it's also very humiliating, the process to actually get those grants and to on every month to go and collect it. And we're also wanting to campaign for a wealth tax. And these are policies that would be redistributive and would contribute to then addressing the very real concerns that South Africans have. But it's been a real struggle to mobilize on the ground. We've been involved in a number of court cases. So the first was where we took Operation Dudula to court in 2024. Oh, no, sorry, 2025, I think it was. Michael, correct me. And we won, where the court provided a directive declaring that these vigilante acts are unlawful, that no citizen can go and ask another person for their documents to prove that they are here legally. No citizen can block access to public services like healthcare and education, because that's what the vigilantes are doing. They stand outside the hospitals, and if you're a foreign national, you're excluded from something like basic healthcare. And of course, it's not only people who don't have documents that are targeted. It's again that horrific way in which the apartheid regime managed and policed Black bodies. It's about the Dom Pass system, asking people to show their papers, and so the court ruled. We've developed information material. We run workshops. We do a lot of interviews to try and raise awareness about the court ruling. But unfortunately, it's a real struggle. And more recently, we won the initial part of a matter that we took to the Equality Court, because we have a policy called PAPUDA, which is about prevention of discrimination and hatred and the Part A ruled that the mayor had to bring down posts on Facebook and social media, because he was calling for all foreigners to be removed from a small little town in KwaZulu-Natal. And we're also part of litigation together with the Treatment Action Campaign and Doctors Without Borders and others, with an organization called Section 27, to challenge the vigilantes and the Department of Health in not ensuring that people can access healthcare. So those are some of the battles that we're involved in. A lot of education, engaging with civil society, trying to, and we work in solidarity with the Palestine solidarity movements. But at the end of the day, I think it's because of the vulnerability of migrants that it's very hard to mobilize, even though CAX is made up and the elected membership includes people who are refugees, asylum seekers, migrants, and they were elected not because of the fact of their status, but they were elected just, as all of us have been. So sorry, I'm struggling with trying to explain that. But I think I hope that gives you a sense of the situation in South Africa, and if I've said something that is not clear, I'm happy to take questions and hopefully some contributions with the wealth of experience that exists with the different people on this call. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you very much. That was very comprehensive, and I thank you, Frank, also about what's going on in South Africa, because those of us who are old enough to remember all of the struggles during apartheid, and I'm sure some of us, apart from me, are, although many of us probably aren't, will remember what a very difficult time it was. And just as a piece of information, last week there was during the radio play section on Radio 4, there was a play called London Recruits that was based on a book that was written about a time when young British people went to South Africa when the ANC was banned in order to plant leaflet bombs. And it was very, the book is also, I have to say, as a sort of expiation, my name is in there as proofreader because I worked on it with the writer. But it is a very interesting book, and the play was very interesting, and it's still on iPlayer if you want to hear it. It's only 45 minutes, doesn't take up that much of your time. So thank you very much, Sharon. Now, I have 3 hands up so far. No, 2, I beg your pardon. Joseph Antoine was first, and Shaza X is second. So Joseph, Sharon, would you prefer to hear both and then reply, or would you prefer to reply one-on-one?
No, I can hear both, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Joseph, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, sister, for that presentation, for that updating us on the situation. And similar to what I would hear Malema and other people associated with Malema says. In fact, last week I was on a webinar, I think, with a group from Nigeria and one from South Africa. I think they were political parties. I think they call themselves Marxist Workers' Party, something like that. But I found it very, very troubling is that throughout the conversation, in terms of the response to the xenophobia in South Africa, no mention was made about Malema's EFF and the other people who were fighting back. And when I raised that, I got support from other people. But the response from the speakers was very chilling. They discounted Malema's place in this thing, accusing him of being, part of the whole thing. I want to explain, help us to understand what is the dynamics there. And then the last piece of news I heard, again, related to the, seemed to be the combining of the MK party and the EFF in response to the president's budget. It seems as though that the MK party and EFF have some difference in terms of their approach to the issue of immigrants. Can you help us explain that? And finally, we have a debt. The EFF expressed condolence for someone, a young person in Limpopo, who have died as a result of the violence, the xenophobia violence, somebody who is a South African. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Shaza, would you like to make your comment, please?
Yes, greetings all, and thank you, Sharon, for your comprehensive presentation and also giving us a background what's happening on the ground in South Africa. I've got 2 questions. One is when the protesters are denying access to other Africans, what exactly are the hospital staff doing? Are they resisting that or what? And the second question is, you mentioned about some funds that was stolen, that was earmarked for, I believe I can't remember who you said it was for. Is it, well, some good cause? Was that money ever repaid by the government or what? Or was it just left? Yeah, those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those questions. I'll start with the economic freedom fighters. I think that, the economic freedom fighters came to the scene giving us all a lot of hope. And on the whole, I think that housed in the EFF is a lot of very good young people who have joined the EFF for the right reasons, for its stance as a Pan-African organization, for its its position on dealing with inequality in South Africa and all of that. Unfortunately, there are serious issues with Julius Malema. He faces corruption charges himself when he was in the Limpopo province, and there's worrying, concerns about where he gets his money from. And so I think that those are some of the concerns that many of us have, because unfortunately, that the EFF has been part of many of our struggles when we were challenging the neoliberal economic policies of the ANC in terms of privatization and outsourcing, which is actually the cause of the bloodbath of jobs in South Africa. This was under the then President Thabo Mbeki. And those jobs have never been regained, never been replaced. And the EFF supported us in those. It's just a question of what is hanging over Julius Malema's head that is of serious concern. And I think if I had to say to you, because I actually voted for the EFF in especially during the state capture era, when Jacob Zuma, plunged our country into the crisis that we're experiencing, or contributed to this crisis. But there are serious concerns about the way in which the EFF is run, the lack of democracy, the fact that it's had one leader since its inception, and I think those are some of the concerns. If it's possible for the young membership to take ownership of the organization, to ensure there's participation and transparency in the way that it runs, I think that it is one of the emerging parties that could, give us some hope in terms of this country and its diversity, and what it can mean to the world, especially in championing human rights and respect for human dignity. The MK party is, as I was just pointing out, when the fall of grace of the former president Jacob Zuma, and really, I think the figures are still not out, of trillions that was stolen, the state capture era with the Guptas. He then launched this party called the MK Party, which is very, deliberate to mislead people, and it's off the block. It got quite a significant number of votes, particularly in KZN. But I'm not so sure that it actually got votes from the EFF. I think it got more votes from the Inkatha Freedom Party. And with the death of Gatsha Buthelezi, the IFP has been bleeding out support mostly to the MK party, and the MK party is predominantly a KZN party. And I think that the rise of this nationalism that we're seeing is actually driven by Jacob Zuma and his opportunistic politics. So there is concern, and the violence of 2021, if you would remember, was when there was charges of contempt of court against him because he refused to come before the court on charges of corruption during the Zondo Commission, and to actually come to the Zondo Commission to give evidence. And he was then arrested to serve time, and he unleashed that violence in KZN with his supporters calling for him to be released, otherwise they would, and there was mayhem. I think the damages went into billions of rands, which we are still recovering from. I'm not sure if that answers your questions. In terms of the recent development, there was a young man called Nhlamo Sambo. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He's a Tsonga speaking person, and he was murdered in the Western Cape just over a week ago, together with what is now unconfirmed of up to 6 Mozambican nationals. And what is worrying, like we all know, first they came for the unionists, and I didn't stand up because I'm not in the union. That is incredibly, telling, and what we're witnessing in South Africa. We're going for foreign nationals. Then we're also hearing that, people who are Shangaan, of Shangaan origin or speak Shangaan, they must also be kicked out. And that's the nature of the weaponization of nationalism that is being allowed to fester in our country. And so he was killed because he didn't speak the language in the way that convinced the perpetrators that he is South African. And his funeral is, I think, taking place as we speak.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sharon. Steve, you have a question or a comment? Steve Cushion?
Yeah, I'm old enough, like Laura, to remember the anti-apartheid movement in this country. And actually, the importance of it was for us of helping to build that radicalism of the 70s. And that international struggle, the combination of raising what is happening elsewhere with what is happening in your own country, I think was very important for us. It's certainly important for me as a young man. And what strikes me now is the similarities between what is happening in South Africa and the growth of a party called Reform in Britain, and smaller groups like Restore England and rubbish like this that are funded by billionaires to scapegoat migrants and therefore to divide workers, and recognizing that how many workers in every country are actually migrants from somewhere else. And so all I'm saying is that I see the parallels, and on behalf of Caribbean Labour Solidarity, I'd like to say that we need to keep in touch, our two organisations. We need to work together. We need to share each other's experiences. And I think by actually saying that not only do we have similar problems in terms of racism, xenophobia, whatever, but we also have a similar fight back, can inspire each other. So please keep in touch, and anything you want us to do, if you want us to stand outside the South African embassy and make a row or something like that, ask us and we shall do it. And if there's anything we want you to do, we shall ask you, and I'm sure you will do it.
Thank you, Steve. I was going to make pretty much the same comments to say I think we can be two organizations working in tandem. Of course, Britain has a similar problem with disinformation about migrants and the number of foreigners there are in England. Given that I'm one of them, of course, I do worry about it sometimes. But Luke has his hand up. Luke, did you want to? We're pretty much coming to the end. Do you want to?
I know. I'm very much aware of that. But I just wanted to greet people for a moment and to say that I wasn't too present at the meeting, mainly because of computer problems at this end and connection problems. I'm in Ghana, by the way, so it's been a little bit difficult getting connected and staying connected early on. So I wanted to, before the meeting closed, just to say thank you to both speakers. Thank you to everyone for coming to the meeting. We had our AGM earlier, and thankfully I've been re-elected as president of Caribbean Labor Solidarity. So I guess you'll have to put up with me for a little bit more yet. It was a real pleasure to see so many of you on the meeting, and we look forward to future meetings with you. And thanks again. Okay, I'll hand back to you, Laura. Thank you.
I would ask Mike and Ndlovu if he wanted to say a few words, or if you would prefer not to. You don't have to. Just I see you there. I want to remind everyone that our meetings are held the first Sunday of every month. So the next one will be the first Sunday of July. We are still trying to get a yes from our prospective speaker. So I'm not going to announce it yet, but links will be posted to members via their emails. It'll be on the website, etc. And Sharon raised her hand again. Sharon, go right ahead.
Yeah, just to sum up and to say thank you very much. And I think that we will be raising within our organization the possibility of joining your network. But what I didn't mention is that there is a looming deadline of June 30th, and we would like to probably consider a statement to be endorsed globally about denouncing the violence, because the vigilantes have given, they've just set the date of 30th of June by which all migrants must be out of South Africa. And of course, they mean Black African people from the African continent. So we will come back to you if that's okay, because we will need international voices denouncing a country that's meant to be lauding and respecting people's basic human rights, and the right to be protected is enshrined in our constitution. Thank you very much for having me and for having CAX.
Thank you, Sharon. And on behalf of the executive, I'm sure that we will come up with a statement. And Kwabena, you are going to be the last speaker, so make it good.
To follow the Bible, the first shall be last. Eh? Okay, it's been a fantastic meeting, and Luke, I can endorse that it was a fantastic annual general meeting, our first for many years. I have posted in the chat the various ways in which people here, participants, can join or assist CLS. We are certainly looking for affiliates, and with the new constitution that's been adopted, it means that affiliates will have a voice, not that they didn't have a voice before. So it's really been great. And Luke, thank you very much for leading the organization so well. And Laura, thank you for a fantastic meeting. And thank you, everybody. So please go to the chat and copy the relevant links. Thank you very much.